Today I am joined by Ishak, all the way from San Diego, California. Thank you very much again for being here, man. So today we're going to talk over a few things. We're going to talk a bit over Ishak's personal experience, who's gone through some great body transformation himself, and then going into depth with what he's achieved as a coach, the direction he's going in, and all things wonderful on those sides as well. So those who don't know who you are, Ishak, now's the time to introduce yourself, man.
Sure, for sure. Let's get it going. Well, I first want to thank you for the opportunity and the very kind intro. And for those that don't know me, I am a physique coach. I am a sports nutritionist. I primarily work with coaches, athletes, general lifestyle people, and pretty much focus on anything with regards to improving overall body composition, improving sports, improving sport performance for those who have specific sport-related goals, and just really focus on education, right? I think that's something that's really big, that's lacking in the evidence-based or fitness space, right? And although there's like tons of content too, right, on Instagram, on social feeds, oftentimes a lot of people fail with regards to understanding how to apply a lot of that information practically. And that's what I aim to do in this industry, is bridge the gap between science and evidence and learning through experience, and really making it in a way to where it's not only understandable, right, but it's able to be easily implemented by many people. So that's what I really focus on, and tons of things in the work. I do anticipate to release a book that I've been working on for the past year and a half now, almost 2 years, and it's dropping next month. I'm not sure when you anticipate to release this, but for those who really want to learn more about the fundamentals and principles with regards to resistance training, sports physiology, so on and so forth, that's a resource I definitely recommend you reference. And I also have my own podcast, Anabolic Radio. Interview different professionals, researchers, and talk about all the nerdy stuff with regards to health, nutrition, training, and I'm also a competitive natural bodybuilder. So this is something I've been pursuing for the past 6 years now, seriously, and it first started out with me sort of pursuing a fat loss related goal, right? So for those of you that don't know me, at 15 years old, I was 250 pounds, and I was teetering on the edge of what would have been, morbidly obese for that age. And I was pre-diabetic, I was hypertensive, and a bunch of things with regards to health definitely weren't trending in the appropriate direction. And a few years earlier, fast forward before 15 years old, my father had actually walked out of my life. So that was something big for me that, I really had to sit and reflect about, the person I wanted. And it's kind of someone 12, 15 years old thinking about this stuff. What the fuck?
It's a lot, man. It's a lot.
Yeah. So, that happening really allowed me to understand that if I wanted to accomplish anything in this life, it was all on me. And I had to really take matters into my own hands, right? So I woke up one day, I was very unhappy with how I looked in the mirror. I was actually taking a picture of a sunburn I had, but I was disgusted with what I saw. And that eventually led me to start educating myself with regards to, counting macros and fat loss and muscle gain related things. And that eventually led me to fall in love with bodybuilders like Kai Green and Branch Warren and Phil Heath and all these different professional bodybuilders, although they were on the enhanced side. All these different bodybuilders that were super big around that time were coming up. I actually found what they did super inspirational. And with regards to me being natural, at the time, because I wasn't ready to, take that jump, or, and in my opinion, taking any sort of exogenous androgen like testosterone or whatever isn't necessarily the most productive thing to do when it comes to long-term health and longevity. So I fell in love with natural bodybuilding. I started following the natural bodybuilding scene. That eventually led me to come across Team 3DMJ. And if you don't know about Team 3DMJ, they are a group of coaches, natural bodybuilding coaches that, they've been in the game for a while, and they're, probably the first group of coaches that really, I don't want to say termed or coined, but they were probably the first ones who really made it big, approaching, a contest prep or fat loss or muscle gain related goal with evidence backing that approach, right?
Nice.
And in 2015, I eventually, worked with, or 2015, 2016-ish, I worked with my first coach, who was Jeff Alberts of Team 3D Muscle Journey, and he's been bodybuilding longer than I've been alive, and he's had so much experience over the years, and he's someone I still admire to this day, and someone I still, find tons of value from with regards to his methodologies and approach to nutrition and training. Anyways, worked with my first bodybuilding coach for about a year during my off season, and then I eventually, or during an off season, my first ever, dedicated muscle building phase. And after that year, I eventually, went through my first contest prep, and I got bit by the bug, and I fell in love with the process, the journey, and everything that bodybuilding taught me as a result to not having, my father there, right? So things like dedication, things like consistency, discipline, perseverance, all these different qualities I really learned from natural bodybuilding. And I guess in a way you could say, it was bodybuilding that raised me, but I really do believe that. And I think it helped, save my life in a way, and really put my life on a path that I wanted it to move in, right? So that's how I fell in love with bodybuilding. That's my transformation. Yeah.
That's wicked, man. And it's, I'm hearing this story completely fresh as well. So that was a really awesome story to hear, because I can imagine, you being at the age of what you said, 12, 13, when you kind of had this decision to make, with sort of starting to take more ownership and take more control of your life, and knowing that was something you need to do a bit more moving forward. And the fact that, that I'm sure there was, any 13-year-old boy or girl, there was probably a lot of you that didn't even understand where to start with it. And the fact that you turned to something that was massively important for just your overall health and well-being to be something to channel and give your focus on, and you found that from such a young age, is really admirable in itself. So that's a huge credit to you as a person, your own kind of mental strength and beliefs, for sure, man. And and no problem at all. It's just, I've just call it how I see it. And you're now in the position that you are because that was a decision you made, and it's very much forged the path that you're going into. And something that I found that kind of really pricked my ears up on multiple occasions was how much you invested time in kind of learning things for yourself, which is massively important. And I feel like people overlook, especially when it comes to nutrition, on a very, very large scale. We're seeing more of it in 2021 now, where there's these quick responses with, more ridiculous fad approaches being pushed by kind of, like D-list celebrities for a quick buck and stuff like this, and things that, literally are eye-roll inducing, like you just did, man. And the issue is that people are looking for a quick fix that doesn't exist with this kind of approach, and with just making these sort of changes, and they're not willing to educate themselves further. But I think something going from more of a coaching standpoint that can be even more frustrating is the fact that everyone has an understanding of what will be more of a valuable and a less valuable choice when it comes to a nutrition kind of aspect, right? You can put two different meals in front of someone, one that's sort of like, greasy fast food, they can have like the same calorie content, for example, And you can get them to say, well, okay, I can see that the one there that isn't the fast food, that's sort of like a decent source of protein, some veg, and, you know, some carbohydrates and sort of like dietary fats that are going to be more beneficial. Even if the calories are the same, you can see that the nutrients you're going to get from them is more beneficial. It doesn't take any kind of qualified genius to work that out. And I think that's where the almost frustration can stem from when it comes to getting people to be adherent and to kind of stick to things when it comes to making better nutritional choices. And the fact that, again, you took that upon yourself to learn that at the age of, like, you know, the very ripe age of 15 is fucking huge, man. Like, that's awesome, you know, because not many, you know, people of, you know, adult age and over still struggle to make those decisions and actually make time to educate themselves. And that is one of the things that I think is a big downside. But another thing kind of looping into this is you saying about the importance of it being evidence-based. And I found that really interesting about the group of bodybuilding coaches that you worked with and have worked with, about the fact that, you know, they're one of the first people around, you said around 2015, correct? That
Correct.
We're doing things where it's sort of like, here's the end product. It's not like, right, let's just get that end product out there, get them to do the best they can on a competitive stage. It's, we've got them to this point, they look shit hot, and this is how we've done it. And that's really cool as well. And I think, would you say that that's probably then very much fed into your approach with things being so focused around evidence-based when it comes to, you know, educating other people and everything that you do? Because kind of looping back into what I already mentioned, there's so much crap out there that isn't evidence-based, that isn't scientific, that will get some sort of knee-jerk response, largely because they're just putting people into a calorie deficit, right? It's not science by any means. It's just causing a calorie deficit by some means. And, you know, I think, yeah, do you think that that's something that kind of very much fed into it, with having that sort of that belief system and that approach, you know, surrounding you from your early experience within bodybuilding?
For sure. Absolutely. A lot of good points. I'm going to try and break it up to the best of my
Sorry,
ability,
man, I just kept going.
No, it's good. Just for some important preface, when I was younger, I was pursuing a career in nursing. So that pushed me into going to nursing school. And I was in nursing school for about like 3 years, which is like 5 semesters. That was an experience that didn't necessarily work out. I ended up getting let go my last semester. So that was a little unfortunate, that I got let go from the program. I got dismissed from the program. But I think at the time I was super salty about it. But looking back now, it actually provided me with a really good foundation for understanding anatomy, physiology, like some biochemistry, a lot of the different things that occur within the body. And I think that foundation allowed me to really, you know, build off of it. And it's just something that I use so heavily today. So that's a bit about my educational background. And then, you know, working with various mentors and coaches over the years is something that's helped me out too. But now, back to your question with regards to, you know, 3D muscle journey and the evidence-based approach, I think that's something big that really stuck out to me, and something that still sticks out to me to this day, just because, one, I love science, I love an evidence-based approach, but with how they approached working with an athlete, it seemed like they were really nurturing and cultivating an environment to where the client or the athlete would be able to thrive in, right? And they're keeping in mind longevity. So it's not only, you know, the fat loss and losing the body fat, but something that's really important is the period of recovery after fat loss, right? So this is a big reason why a majority of fat loss programs or diets out there fail, is because oftentimes many people plan for fat loss, but they don't really plan for the period of recovery afterwards, okay? So what happens in a typical person's, you know, mind is, okay, I'm going to diet, I'm going to lose this body fat, and then it's back to eating burgers and pizza and all these things. And it's okay. It's like, okay, well, you could totally do that, but you're really, you know, neglecting and failing to continue to stay consistent with the majority of the habits that you've been working so hard to build, right? And this is a conversation I have with every single one of my clients before they even start with me. It's like, okay, you're working with me, and I want you to understand this is not some 8-week or 12-week bullshit that you're going to give your all, and then when you're done, you're going to fall off the wagon. No, this is going to be something you're going to maintain for the rest of your life, because when you're 30 or when you're 40, you don't want to move like you're 50. You want to move like you're 40. You want to play with your kids. You want to run around with your kids. Eventually, you want to play with your grandkids, right? And this is something that I always try to hammer home, because oftentimes a lot of people gravitate towards nutrition and training because, they want that physical aspect of things, which there's totally nothing wrong with, right? That's why I first got into it in the first place, right?
Exactly.
But it's very, 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 very important to understand that, you being able to train is not only a privilege, okay? You taking care of your health is a privilege, but there are a variety of adaptations that occur outside of building muscle and losing body fat that occur as a result of resistance training. Like you have a lower resting heart rate, you have lower or you have an improved ability to utilize carbohydrates. Right? You have decreased risk of cancer. You have all these different things that occur because of it. So it's like, in my head, I don't know why, a certain individual wouldn't want to invest even an hour or 45 minutes, 3 times a week or 4 times a week. You don't have to train like you're a natural bodybuilder. You don't have to train like a power lifter or an Olympic lifter. But even investing that small bit of time every single day is something that will make a substantial impact on your overall quality of living and your health. Right?
Yeah.
So another point you brought up was quick fixes, right? This is something that's very common in the industry, and oftentimes it's a marketing thing, right? Yeah. So the marketing team responds to what do people want most, right? The sales team responds, oh, people want to get results without doing anything, or the marketing team says, okay, let's do that and let's sell them, right? So this is where you find things like, these detox teas, these diet pills, this crazy special magic food or diet, or, figure out your calories based on your body type, right? All this is bullshit, okay? Yeah. And oftentimes neglects, the root problem of what, caused that person to get where they are today, right? Which is improper eating habits. You're not taking care of your sleep. You're not taking care of your stress management. You're not taking care of your micronutrition. The list is endless, right? So definitely. I think, quick fixes are always going to be there, but let's say you take a quick fix approach. At the end of that approach, you may potentially not only gain back what you lost, but some more. So like the habit change, behavioral change is so complex, and it's going to far exceed what I'd be able to cover in our conversation right now.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Quick fixes are going to be something that really prevent you from achieving that sustainable change that you want to maintain for your life. Definitely. So that's something really big. And you had mentioned another thing about, calorie content between different food sources. Okay. And this is a big thing because, this is a topic I'm super passionate about, because, oftentimes people just say calories in versus calories out, right? Okay. And it's the law of thermodynamics, calories in versus calories out, is a law for a reason, right? If you don't know what thermodynamics is, basically how our body utilizes and expresses, energy from the food that we consume. Okay. Yeah. Now, if calories was all that mattered, then everybody would be eating low calorie and exercising, themselves out of their minds, and they'd get results, right? But it neglects what really allows someone to achieve optimal results, okay? And that occurs as a result of focusing on macronutrients in the right proportion, micronutrients, muscle protein synthesis, nutrient timing, the list is ever expansive with nutrition, right? So I think the message we need to be sending is, instead of saying calories is all that matters, we need to be sending the message that, okay, calories matter, but so do macros, so do micronutrients, so do them proportioned in the right amounts. And the chances of someone achieving fat loss without a nutritional system that supports the proper habit change needed to achieve those results is far less than having, someone having a strategically structured, nutritionally periodized system that allows them to thrive over an extended period of time. Okay. And the other thing too is you don't need to be in a calorie deficit to optimize fat loss. Although, it is optimal, you could still build muscle and lose fat at maintenance. You could still build muscle and lose fat, even in a surplus. Although it might not be as optimized if you were in a deficit, it's still possible, right? So that's something big to take into account. I guess it's just like more important context we need to be adding to the conversation. And context is everything, and it's something that's ever fleeting with social media and the sound bites and these restricted captions, and there's only so much we could try to do, but putting out this message and having these conversations is something that's super important. That's why I also started my podcast too.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And looping back to something you said at the start, just with helping and educating others is so important, and just giving people the knowledge that they need to then do with whatever they please, but just knowing that they've got the evidence-based and the correct knowledge, as opposed to the amount of negative stuff that is out there or can be detrimental, as you mentioned, with these fatty approaches and stuff like that. And sadly, I do think you are right on that note of you saying that they probably will always be there, because there's always going to be a market for that kind of quick response, quick sort of fix, and just snap it up and let's see what we can do, as opposed to it being actually let's learn something here and look at making sustainable changes, making lifestyle changes or have a positive impact. And that's another thing you said as well about finding it quite frustrating, the fact that you could, the list of benefits from eating better and exercising frequently is huge. It's absolutely huge, and it's almost never ending. And the fact that some people can't seem to grasp that can be very frustrating. But I think, that comes down to a host of different things that are beyond our probably our time frame of conversation again today, with psychological impacts and stuff like this. But it's a fascinating subject, full stop. As you were saying with the nutrients, and just getting people to kind of grasp the fact that so much spans beyond calories in versus calories out, which seem to be almost the tagline for nutrition. When over the last kind of couple of years, maybe back in sort of like mid 2019 to like early last year, there was a couple of fitness professionals that was, all it is a calorie deficit. It's like, well, yes and no, like there's a lot more to it than that. And also it's one of those things that, yes, counting calories and stuff like this is one of the surefire ways to make yourself accountable, and can very much aid towards achieving whatever the goal is, even away from fat loss. But it's one of those things that doesn't always work for each individual. And as you said, it's the context of how you want to apply this to the individual to make it work for them as well, which is massively important. But it is something that I think is still massively overlooked. So I'll just either be in a deficit, or I'll work to whatever I need to be, and then otherwise I can just fill the meals and the actual numbers with whatever I fancy. So, well, technically, yes, you can, because as you just said, that's the black and white of it. Sorry. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you're going to be getting the best from that. You need to ensure that the quality of what you're putting in is massively important. So would you mind if I kind of dove back a little bit to the moment when you decided, like, okay, right, I want to make a change. I want to have a look at doing something about the way that my body is at the moment. When it was around 15, you said you wanted to first make that change, right? And kind of the thought process and how you approached that, because I'm guessing largely to begin with it was off your own back. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So how was that for you? Like how did you approach that? Because there'll be many people either watching or listening to this that may be in a position sort of like, cool, I want to give this a go, but either I can't afford to invest in a coach, or like I don't know where to start, because it can be a minefield.
For sure, absolutely. So I'm not really too sure about how I approached things back then, and yeah. I reckon how I approached things then weren't as optimal as I approach things now. Okay.
For sure, man. It was
and
knowing
the
what you
reason
knew, right?
I just approach things based on what I knew, right? And so more time, more experience, more learning lessons along the way, I eventually know way more than I did back then, right? So, for anyone who has a body composition or, fitness related goal, there are a couple of things, you could do to really ensure you're getting maximal results. Okay. So this is a fat loss related goal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the first thing that's really important is your environment. Setting your environment up for success is, something that's really important. So let's say, for example, you don't have, a good support environment, right? Or you're keeping things in your household that you shouldn't keep in your household because you're gonna go balls deep on the full package, right? Of wafers or jar of peanut butter, jar of Nutella, whatever, right? So setting your environment up for success is something that's really important too. And I also think having the appropriate expectations is really important as well. So let's say, for example, you set whatever goal you want for yourself, let's say fat loss related goal, and let's say, you say in 6 weeks, okay, 6 weeks, I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to be 100% adherent. And by the end of those 6 weeks, you anticipate to see shredded 6-pack abs, okay? 6 weeks come and go, and you're not going to see a 6-pack shredded abs, right? So that is an inappropriate expectation for that goal that you set out for yourself, right? So this is what's called an expectation reality mismatch. Okay. And this is something that, is very common with people who don't know any better. There's nothing wrong with having these expectations, but it's awesome that you want a 6-pack. It's awesome that you want a bigger ass, whatever goal you set out for yourself. But at the same time, you need to have realistic expectations for how long it's going to take you to actually achieve that goal based on your starting position. So, that typically entails setting both short-term and long-term goals that that are not only realistic, but that are able to keep you motivated and stay consistent along the way. Okay. So expectation management's another big one. I think, depending on your approach, it should fit your dietary preferences. Okay. So keto, paleo, if it fits your macros, whatever popular diet you want to name, okay?
Yeah.
It all works based on what I had previously mentioned, which is the law of thermodynamics, okay? Calories in, calories out. Now, there are advantages in different types of dietary approaches, right? And that depends on the context of the individual, right? But at the end of the day, okay, you should enjoy what you're doing, okay? You should be eating things that are nutritious, things that are minimally processed. You should be having a sufficient amount of protein, being, anywhere from 0.8 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of, you could either do body weight, but me personally, I like calculating protein intake based on lean body mass. Protein intake is really important. Dietary preference is really important, right? And you could still, enjoy some of those unconventional foods. So let's say 90% of what you're consuming is minimally processed, wholesome, micronutrient dense foods. Then the other 10% of your calories, macros, whatever, you could allocate to some of those unconventional foods, being, ice cream, pizza, whatever the case may be, right? And this is something that's really big too, because people are like, oh, I could have pizza and ice cream. I thought this was good food and bad food, right? That's another conversation we could get into. There's no good foods or bad foods. There's just foods that provide you with more or less micronutrient content, right? So eating quote unquote clean, wholesome, minimally processed foods isn't necessarily better or worse, but it's oftentimes the smarter option to gravitate towards when it comes to managing hunger, satiety, ensuring you're getting sufficient fuel to perform and recover for your training sessions. That's something big to really take into account. And that's the other thing: good food, bad food, clean food, dirty food, whatever, cheat day, all these different terms we use for, our perspective about a certain food. I think, 2020 is the year we really need to put them in the coffin, and we really just need to understand the nuances that actually impact nutrition and training, right? Let's see what else. Expectation management, environment, dietary preferences. I also think tracking your progress, that's something that's really important too. So, what gets tracked improves. Okay. If you don't track it, how do you expect to improve with it? This goes for your body weight, goes for your training, goes for your nutrition, right? So if you want to progress towards a certain goal, you have to have some sort of quantifiable means for progressing towards that goal. Okay. This could be weighing yourself in the AM. This could be tracking your macros. This could be tracking your weights. This could be taking body weight measurements, right? It's very important that we obtain this data and we track it on a week-to-week basis, so you're able to accurately assess whether or not you are moving in the right direction, or if you're not. And if you're not, that prompts you to make, the appropriate adjustment. I think probably the last one, big one, for setting, goals is just understand your why. Why are you doing it? Is it because you want to impress that girl at the gym? Is it because you want to, impress your friends, six-pack shredded abs? And there's nothing wrong with, these surface-like goals, like I had previously expressed. But I think eventually, as you become a little bit more mature, the longer you do this, you need to reflect on the importance of why you're actually doing what you do. So, longevity, improved health, better confidence, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something that's really big, especially for competitors, right? They want to start a contest prep because they want to impress their friends. They want a trophy, whatever. Let me tell you a story. My last season, after my first show, I won the overall. Okay, nice. Or I didn't win the overall. I won the overall for my class. Okay, and my trophy broke the next day. Okay.
No.
Now, what this taught me was that trophies mean absolutely fuck all, right? You can't put a trophy on the amount of hours or time and energy that you invested towards a specific goal, right? So if you're starting a contest prep with the intent of, I want to win the overall, I want to win the goal, that could be something that's detrimental for you to actually achieve your full potential. Right. And there's actually even literature on this. Right. Oftentimes people who approach their goals with, a process oriented mindset rather than a goal oriented mindset, achieve their goal more than the people who, just, they want the end result. Right. Because that person who's process oriented, they're focused on all the little things they have to do every single day, like a checklist, okay? Yeah. Check my nutrition, check my sleep, check my training, check my steps, check my stress management, all these different things, right? And then doing that on a day-to-day basis eventually compounds and accumulates and takes them to a place where they want to be, right?
Momentum, man. Absolutely.
Momentum. Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. And this is something that I would like to skim the surface a bit with you as well, is the psychological element and impact that can certainly come around any kind of competition, but especially when it's so heavily focused on the way that you look and how exposed you essentially are, just in every aspect when it comes to physique competing. And the people that I know quite closely and have been involved with closely that have done this previously, and something again kind of looping back into a topic you mentioned earlier on that I think is massively important, is first of all kind of the impact of coming out of that after you've been in a very extreme kind of restricted state when you're getting up to like competition ready, right? And I've heard of a few cases of people that I know relatively well who have kind of been left a bit high and dry with this, and sort of come out the other side of it and been like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And of course, that's completely on the coach and on their know-how.
Sorry to cut you off. What's fucked up is that's something that's very common in this space.
Yeah, and I was wondering because the few sort of like accounts of it that I had heard from kind of people relatively close. I was wondering if it was something that was quite common, and whether that's something I hope that you haven't, but it's something you've experienced yourself, or
nothing that I've personally experienced. It's something that prospect clients definitely tell me it's something they experience. It's something I hear so many horror stories, man. It's very, very disheartening, especially for someone who takes what they do like very, very seriously, right? So here's the thing. I think it's all on the coach, right? If your coach isn't giving you a game plan for recovery, let's say 2 weeks after, your season or whatever, your show or whatever competition, even sports specific, right? Like powerlifting or, Olympic lifting. The same thing could be, said. But anyway, specifically for dieting, for fat loss, in the context of contest prep, I think utilizing different strategies like refeeds and diet breaks are very valuable with regards to attenuating a lot of the negative adaptations that occur within fat loss. Okay. So depending on how long you've been dieting for, depending on how aggressive you're dieting, there are negative repercussions associated with you being in a energy restricted state for extended periods of time. Okay, so intermittent energy restriction using things like refeeds, diet breaks are very important means for us to break up those, super focused, I'm in an energy restricted state modes. Okay, refeeds and diet breaks are beneficial for preserving lean body mass, right? And they're also beneficial for improving training performance, improving recovery, improving leptin and ghrelin, which are two massive hormones that regulate your appetite and satiety. And they're also beneficial psychologically too, right? So, when you've been dieting for a while, having 1 to 2 days where you're able to consume a little bit more food than you're typically used to, not only is it beneficial on a psychologically, but physically, and there's a bunch of positive things associated with it, but especially psychologically, right? Because you're no longer restricted, you're able to enjoy a little bit more food. Maybe you go out with your girlfriend or whatever, you have some frozen yogurt, right? That's something that not only keeps her happy because he's not fucking eating all his pre-prepared meals, this, that, and the other, right? But it's something that really helps psychologically too. This is another thing that I didn't really mention, but if you have a significant other and you're in a contest prep, learning how to manage that is super important, because you don't want to potentially risk, losing that person that you care so much about because you're so focused on your goal, right? So that's something big to take into account. Now, with regards to contest prep or fat loss recovery phases, there's two different approaches that really stand out. So the first one is the reverse dieting model. Okay, so the reverse dieting model, let's say we have someone who's eating 1,700 calories at the tail end of their prep. The reverse dieting model slowly implements calories on a week-to-week basis within an 8-week time span. Okay, now my issue with that, and I don't have an issue with it, okay? So let me rephrase what I'm saying, because it works. It just depends on the context, right? But I would say the caveat to this approach is that it keeps you in a deficit after you got done competing for up to 8 weeks, right? Whereas the second model, which is called the recovery diet, okay, which is actually coined by Team 3DMJ. They came out with this back in 2015, 2016. But the recovery diet model, so you already have a general, or you should, or your coach should already have a general idea of where your theoretical maintenance lies. Okay.
Sure.
So after you got done dieting 1,700 calories, you're automatically going to increase your calories back up to maintenance, because the show is gone. There's no reason to maintain sub 10% body fat, right? Because being super low body fat's not good for your health, FYI, for anyone listening. So we'll talk about it. But anyways, The recovery diet, okay, you automatically increase your calories up to maintenance. There are so many benefits we get from, increased food, especially at the tail end of the diet. But, you're back up to maintenance within that 8-week time frame. Your
Sure.
goal should be to gain 10 to 15 pounds of body fat back, okay? Mm-hmm. So now, for a very important context, contest prep, bodybuilding, whatever, shredding to super low body fat percentages is not good for your health. And I want this to be very, very clear. It's very detrimental to you psychologically, right? You start to potentially develop signs and symptoms of body dysmorphia, right? But sorry, brain fart. It's not healthy. Right. Oh, your hormones also take a hit too. For males, testosterone significantly goes down. For females, you could potentially experience amenorrhea, which is loss of your menstrual cycle, which is not a normal thing. And it's very important, at the tail end of a diet, fat loss phase, contest prep, whatever, that you gain back body fat at an appropriate rate, okay? Gain back body fat at an appropriate rate. So, you're switching your gears from trying to be as lean as possible to gaining back body fat to perform better, to recover better, and to just live, a happier life, right? So, I don't know of anyone who, likes dieting for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and they can't go out and, enjoy dinner with their friends or their girlfriend or whatever. I think it's, especially for athletes, it's very important to, provide yourself those periods of time where you pull back on the gas, and those periods of times where you really turn up the gas and you adjust whatever you're doing nutrition and training wise to really be conducive to the lifestyle that you want to live with whatever you're currently at in your journey, right? So if that entails, going out to eat 3 days a week, 4 days a week with your wife or a girlfriend or whatever, then go do that. Enjoy it. It's different phases. There's no reason for you to be strict, 5 meals a day, train, this, that, and the other, and you're just like on a military schedule. So sure, that might be very important for you to thrive during a contest prep, during competition preparation. But when that's over, be a little easy on yourself. Okay. Absolutely, you're not a dog. You're not in the army. You don't need to order yourself around. Just chill out, be good to yourself, be easy on yourself, really enjoy what you're doing, adjust it to where you enjoy it a bit more, especially in those off seasons or, the times you're not preparing for anything. And you'll find that, you progress easier over an extended period of time. So another thing, oftentimes a lot of people are very short-sighted with what they want to accomplish, right? And they're very, quick, like we previously spoke about, quick. I know you want abs like yesterday, but just relax, okay? Just relax. I think it's very important to think of it as a lifespan, So me, being a natural bodybuilder, I know I'm not at my peak potential at, 23. I'll probably be at my peak potential at the tail end of my 30s. You know what I mean? But with that in mind, that keeps me motivated on improving until, I get to that period of time. Right. So that's something big to take into account. People come to me and they say, Coach, I'm willing to do anything. And I can think back to the days where I used to identify with such statements, but now to me that's a massive red flag and a sign of that all or nothing scarcity mentality. Like, I need to do this. I must do this. Must is never a good word to be using, especially in the context of, us setting goals out for ourselves. But, I think it's very important to really understand that, the days are going and, the more you're focused on achieving that end goal, the more you're preventing yourself from actually learning the things you need to learn in order to thrive. And this is not just nutrition or training. This is internally, right? So this is a spiritual process as well. I'm not sure if you've experienced
life.
it, especially like competition preparation. You tend to understand a very important power that you have within yourself, which is you're able to manifest your vision and the things that happen up here, right? So the things that you achieve, let's say you set a goal for yourself, you want to total whatever, right, for whatever lifts, okay? Now by the end of, or let's say you plan for that goal, by the end you get to that goal, you wouldn't have been able to achieve that goal without first changing your thoughts, which would then lead to you changing your action day to day. So if you have the thought of, okay, I'm going to have X amount of meals per day, I'm going to weigh out all my food, I'm going to make sure that, I'm managing everything appropriately, that's not going to occur without you first, understanding your why, setting this vision out for yourself, and then, approaching it accordingly.
Definitely. And so many great facts that you've brought up there, and loads of really, really good thought-provoking bits as well, Ishak. So I really appreciate that. And it's one of those things as well that you mentioned with kind of just mindset behind things, being sort of focuses and goals, and the larger scale. I really, really liked you saying about, you reaching your peak potential, sort of like you're saying, like towards kind of like early 30s, and it's one of those things that is very easy to kind of overlook, is that larger span, because it's so, it very much kind of, it taps into the almost the dopamine side of our brains, where it's kind of like we need that next kind of gratification, we need that next fix, we need that next thing to come in, and having that bigger scope is massively important. Is hugely important for many things in life, but especially when it comes to kind of reaching true potential. And
I like to call it big picture thinking. I picked it up from Jeff Alberts, 3DMJ.
Sure, man. And it's a great way to think. It's a really good way to think. And yeah, I love your thoughts as well on the coming out of that restricted phase, whether it be contest prep, whether it be fat loss, and just how to kind of manage that appropriately. Because when you're going to any extreme like that, you can very much lose as well. It's very easy just to look at the black and white of kind of a objective with that sort of stuff, and the personal element that you included is massively important, of just getting your life back a little bit more and doing those things that you probably would end up having to drop back, like you said, going out for meals with your friends or your partner or whatever, and that's hugely important as well. So how and when in the timeline for you then, Ishak, did this all start to feed into your aspiration and kind of desire and love for coaching and helping other people kind of achieve things that you've gone through and just passing on the knowledge?
It's a good question. So I could not step on stage again and I'll be totally content with it, right? And that's because what I've managed to learn through the contest prep itself, which is, achieving your best self, right? And achieving your best self doesn't occur until you put a lot of time and effort and consistency and you're on it, right? But, while you can, in the context of contest prep, while you could achieve your best self physically, there are other aspects of your life in which you could achieve your best self in, whether that be financially, whether that be with your relationships, whatever the case may be. So that's something big that contest prep, my last contest prep, really allowed me to realize. And back to what I was saying, I could not compete again and be happy, because that's the realization that I've had. Like it still gets me going. I'm still passionate about it, but I'm more so right now with where I'm currently at with my current journey. I'm more focused on educating others, right? I have immense passion for teaching other people nutrition, training, and through the course of writing my book, I've actually fallen in love with biomechanics. That's probably one of my most liked aspects of resistance training, just because there's so much thought that goes into it, and eventually I want to get to a point, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, when this situation with lockdown and everything blows over, be able to travel again. Can't wait to go to the UK for Body Power. And I plan to do workshops too. Workshops about whatever, nutrition, training, but I want to do in-person workshops because I think there is tons of value to be gained out of educating people in person that I can't necessarily do in an online setting, right? And it's more personal too, right? You're actually seeing these people's faces and you're building relationships with them, right? So that's the other thing.
Definitely. And I love what you said about biomechanics as well, man, because it's something that over my years of coaching, I've gradually fallen more in love with as well, because it's more so than just kind of the understanding of it. They kind of the crossover to how it makes it so relatable to each individual and each individual that you work with, and getting the most from their movement. I find absolutely fascinating. I love it, because no two people are designed to move the same, nor should they. And that comes completely down to their biomechanics and their bone structure. So it's one of those things that it does go, very much into the anatomical and sciencey aspect of what we do as coaches. But at the same time, it has that strong crossover to real life and each individual, which I really, really like. So you with your first comp, then you said that was around 2015, sorry.
2015.
Sure. Were you coaching at the time then, or was this prior to you coaching?
So around 2015, I was not coaching. I think around 2016, I had gotten my first gym. I had gotten my first job as a personal trainer in a commercial gym.
Sure.
I did that for about 6 months before, I decided to pursue nursing a bit more seriously. And during that period of time, I actually coached people for free. So I coached people for free throughout my entire, nursing school up until I got out for about another year. And I eventually, pursued, trying to build a career in this industry, right? And that happened with first meeting Matt Ogus. Do you know who Matt Ogus is?
I don't actually, man, but tell me more.
You gotta look him up. Great guy. Yeah. Shout out to Matt. Anyways, I had first met him in 2016, and he was a big, big at that time in natural bodybuilding and fitness space. He was one of Gymshark's first athletes, along with
I probably seen his face then for sure.
Yucky Lovato, yeah, and shout out to Yuck. And anyways, meeting Matt and him believing in me was actually probably one of the first steps that allowed me to start believing in myself. And because at the time I was around people who I wouldn't say didn't necessarily support me. They didn't support me, but they're very medical oriented, doctor, nurse, pharmacist, Okay. And I had this thing that I was super passionate about on the side that I knew if I took seriously, I'd be able to kill it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did around 2016 after, competing in my first show. I made a move out to San Diego, and I've been living in San Diego for 5 years now. And when I first moved to San Diego, I had a living situation that went south, and I had to live in my car for a year. I wouldn't say have to. No one really forced me to do it, right? It was a decision that I made, but it was a decision that I made knowing that if I just got a chance to focus on myself, I'd be able to be successful doing what I love. Anyways, I lived in my car for a year while I built my business, and this was while working 2 jobs at a supplement store and at a bank. I saved enough money to first get my own place and then invest in building out the back end for Hawkfit, and eventually built my coaching business. And it's crazy to think back that that was 5 years ago. It seems like yesterday, right? But yeah, that was something that's super big that I learned a ton from, is just living out of my car. And you know, I was still training during this time, like seriously, like I would wake up every day, 4 a.m., go to the gym. First thing I do, shower after, and then go to a coffee shop and work on the back end for a bit before I had work, and then, you know, back and forth. So that was my situation for about a year. I would say I wouldn't have been able to get through that situation if I didn't see bigger things for myself. So, I mean, I let this be a PSA to anyone. You know, if you could imagine a better future for yourself, you could create it, right? All you have to do is be willing to invest the appropriate amount of time, energy, and effort. And just going back to what you had previously said about biomechanics, it's super big, right? It's something that a lot of people don't take into account. There was recently a paper published by Brad Schoenfeld. Do you know Brad Schoenfeld?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So there's paper published by Brad Schoenfeld, and they were investigating, individual biomechanics, and their finding was that what they call was anthropometrics. Okay, very nerdy word for you all. Yeah. They had found that individual anthropometrics is something that significantly impacts, exercises. So depending on how you perform an exercise, depending on your setup, depending on your execution for that movement, depending on your own structure, significantly impacts what you're actually targeting while performing that exercise. So I could be performing a horizontal row, right? Mm-hmm. But depending on how I'm performing it, that would either bias the movement to getting a bit more lat, or that would bias the movement to getting a bit more upper back, right? So, and I wouldn't say someone starting out needs to be an expert with biomechanics and understanding this, that, and how to individualize everything, but this is where having guidance comes into play. That's super important, right? Definitely. Seeking a mentor or coach. This is where improving your own education, and it doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't have to be a master about it, but at least understanding your body, right? This is where it becomes really important too, and how to individualize things for yourself. And like, it could be the base level, right? Even anatomy, right? You don't have to be an expert at reciting origins, insertions, anatomy, naming every single muscle group, but really having a base understanding of anatomy will have a massive impact on you being able to visualize what you're doing, what you're targeting, how to move, if something feels off, right? That's something big too. You don't have to be an expert with your anatomy, but having a base understanding will likely allow you to train a bit more efficiently and effectively.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And again, something that you've included multiple times is just educating yourself. And it's one of those things that, either educating yourself or being educated and helped out by a coach or a mentor, as you mentioned. And that's something that's massively important as well, because I do feel that it's not necessarily always the case that coaches or personal trainers are educating. It's more spoon feeding. And so as a result, they become, a reliable source, a source that they have to be relied on, And it's one of those things I say to any new client, like, that I'm working with one-to-one in person. Eventually I want to be in a situation where you almost don't need me. Like, to me, then I've done my job, like
I wish more coaches were like that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And it's one of those things that I want you to be self-sufficient. I don't want you to just turn to me when you need that extra bit and you need that kind of, still having programming and taking the thought process out, for example, and things like this, instead of it just being like, here's this next bit. Okay, chew that up. Okay, keep going. You know what I mean? And just sort of, actually getting people to think for themselves and understand why they're doing things. And of course, not every single, person that walks through the door, is going to want that level of service from you. I've done it before, like before I fully understood that, and I was very passionate about just putting things across the way that they should be put across, that some people just gloss over. And they just want to turn up. They want you to train them. They want you to tell you what to do, and they want to get out and have a good workout. Whereas, but it's then knowing your audience, isn't it?
And that's something that was really valuable for me to learn as a coach, was that not everybody wants the full explanation as to the why. But it's one of those things that, I make a point of now saying to people, like, I can always go as in-depth or as kind of scaled back as you'd like with things. But it's a case of being like, well, okay, well, at the same time, I will still always explain as to why I'm doing things, because it's another one of those things where I don't want clients to ever think, oh, he's just doing this because it either looks cool or he's not sure what else to do. You know what I mean? And so like, I want people to know that this is a purpose for this. There is a purpose for this. Sorry.
Absolutely.
And this is why it's here.
Great points you just touched on. Now, I think something that I dislike in the industry is generalizations and making things too simple at times, sound bites. These are things that I think are a bit more detrimental in our space. And my response to people who say, oh, it's too complex, the human body is complex.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's complex because it needs to be.
It needs to be kept simple until it needs to be complex. Right? Mm-hmm. And everything needs to be at your level of understanding before it could be understood or applied. So if I'm getting a Mary McMuffin top, I'm not going to fucking be talking about muscle protein synthesis, nutrient timing, this, that, and the other, although those are very important variables, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
We'd most likely focus on, better eating habits, consistent balanced meals, this, that, and the other, sufficient protein. Once they're able to demonstrate proficiency with hitting their macro targets, that makes me a little bit more comfortable in educating them about different things. Okay, like this week, we're going to focus on optimizing your digestive health. These are the things we would likely do to do that. Or, this week we're going to be focusing on optimizing nutrient timing. Okay, optimizing your pre and post workout nutrition, whatever the case may be. Everything is ever expansive, right? I think it needs to be at the individual's level for them to for sure understand.
But then you can scale up, right? You can just continually nudge that up, because chances are if you get them to buy in, and they will buy in because they'll see the benefit from you explaining these things, and then they'll see the real life results of that happening. And once they've kind of got that buy-in, they will more than likely take it as an interest in, so I would like more from this, and I'd like you to explain more about that. And that's part of coaching in itself, is knowing, again, it's knowing your audience, and it's knowing how to kind of scale those things up. And there's that great saying, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. And that's massively important as well. If you want to call on more in-depth kind of sciencey anatomical stuff, then call on that when it's needed. But there's also another thing as well, like, if, like you said, you've got a certain client in front of you who's brand new to this environment, probably feels intimidated by it, and you start spurting off massive big anatomical words, you're just going to end up making her feel silly, her or him, whatever, and that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to alienate someone by stroking your own ego and trying to sound really intelligent at the wrong point. It's like, just know the person that's in front of you and be like, okay, cool, this is where we're at, this is what you need. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And then, like you said, it's just, you've then opened up the avenue of just gradually scaling up and kind of getting that further education in as you go along.
Absolutely. Levels. It's not rocket science. It doesn't have to be rocket science either.